Thank you, Kathy. That was a wonderful introduction. How's my volume? Everybody hear me all right? Is it all right? Okay. Yeah, you can rely on me to take an easy question and make it more complicated because I like to talk. But yes, Kathy hit the nail on the head. I am a firm believer in the power of prayer. I'm a prayer chaplain after all. And I've seen prayer change lives, lots and lots of lives, mine in particular, especially around healing and health. So the question for today to explore is prayer alone enough, or should we also take action too? But wait a minute, isn't praying an action? After all, to pray is a verb, right? So am I saying to do that or to do even more? And this is a question that I have as well. And for the record, I'm not saying anyone has to do anything. I'm simply exploring the topic, inviting all of us to engage in it. And yes, praying is an action, and it's not a minor one. As Kathy said, I learned affirmative prayer, a specific way of praying, at East Bay Church of Religious Science in Oakland. And there we call prayer, affirmative prayer, a spiritual mind treatment. So when we do this specific kind of prayer, which I'm going to outline in a minute, we are actually helping the mind get where we want our entire being to be so that we can have the outcome that we want to have. The verb form, now spiritual mind treatment, we call it treatment for short. And the verb form is to treat. And that means saying a prayer out loud, a spiritual mind treatment out loud for yourself or someone else. It consists of 5 steps. And I'm going to go through those steps briefly and give you an example from my own life. The first step is recognition. And that when we do that, we're reminding ourselves that in the universe, oneness or God or spirit is all that there really is. We might say, there is no spot where God is not. That's recognition. The next step is unification. That's where we unite ourselves with that oneness consciously, because we're never actually really separate from it, but we might drift away and forget that we are one with spirit. So that's when we can say in the prayer or in the treatment, God and I are one. Declaration, the third step, is where we affirm or declare that which we would like to create, that which we feel is missing, but we speak it not as if it's missing, but as if it's actually happening or has already happened. So for example, I recently had a procedure dealing with kidney stones. So what I want to declare in my prayer is that my kidney stones are hereby resolved. I enjoy, not I will enjoy, I am enjoying radiant, glowing health. So that makes me grateful. The fourth step is gratitude. We give thanks for our declaration as if it's already complete. Thank you, Spirit, for my radiant, glowing health, especially for my kidneys. And then all that's left to do is release the prayer. We're giving it back to Spirit. We're releasing it so that love and law can have its way with it. And we might say, and you've heard me say this, I release my word to love and law, knowing it is done as I have spoken. And sometimes just saying that prayer will experience a shift in our consciousness about our situation. We may be filled with peace or with a confidence that we have let that prayer go and the healing is on its way. And sometimes that is really all that's necessary. And sometimes that's really all we can do, because it may be a situation like when I'm thinking about the Middle East. It's not like I can go over there and call all those parties to the negotiating table. I'm not set up to do that. So that feels like moment by moment. That is all I can do. If I'm praying for another person, especially, I can pray for their highest good, and I don't even have to know what that is, because I may not be able to, and I need to let that go. I get to let the angels of their higher nature bless them the best way possible. It's not for me to judge what that should look like, and it's not my job to fix them. I get to let that go and sit with that. But sometimes action is called for. And at East Bay Church, we learned a saying. It goes like this: treat and move your feet. Pray, yes, but then do the obvious. You've heard the story of the guy who prays religiously to God. God, please let me win the lottery day after day. Please let me win the lottery. Please, pretty, please, pretty, please. And then one day God looks down at him and says, could you help me out a little bit? Could you at least buy a lottery ticket? You got to move your feet sometimes. So as I pray for urinary and kidney health, I've got to drink my water. In fact, I've got to drink about 3 times as much water as I'm used to drinking. And I'm starting to do that. I've got to get good at drinking my water. And while I'm drinking my water, I am visualizing those stones flushing right out of my urinary system, easily broken down, because I had that procedure, broken down and easily flushing out and away as I drink. And is that enough? Well, I use a lot of creative visualization. I just explained one. Visualizing while I'm drinking my water that the water is actually flushing the kidney stones out through my body. And that's what I did when I had Hodgkin's disease. I visualized the cancer cells shrinking and shrinking and shrinking and disappearing. But if that's all I did, I can't be sure that I would be in remission from that today. Because I also had 26 radiation treatments, and that was part of the deal. And I think it was a crucial part of the deal, especially and this was before I discovered religious science and affirmative prayer. So I knew to visualize, but I didn't know about prayer. So given that, I think it was especially crucial for me to have those radiation treatments, because that was what I believed in at the time and still do, in the power of the art and science of modern medicine and ancient medicine as well to heal the body. So I visualized those rays zapping the cancer cells and helping my lymph system clean itself of those cells. And this is also why when they offered me to have a urethroskopy and laser lithotripsy, I said yes to that as well, because I know that those laser beams and those ultrasonic waves can break up kidney stones, and I was all about that. So now I'm doing my best to both eat and drink for my kidneys with the water, and certain foods that I'm supposed to eat and certain foods that I'm not supposed to eat. Turns out that both almonds and chocolate are high in oxalates, and oxalates can contribute to kidney stones. So I have been about 4 weeks completely chocolate free. No, I take that back. I cannot lie. I got taken out for my birthday and I ate a little bit of chocolate mousse and brought the rest home. So I will eat it in minuscule proportions, but I am doing my best to change my eating habits to support my kidneys. And while I'm doing that, I'm still praying for my health and healing, because I don't look at it as either or. For me, it's both and. After all, there's no spot where God is not. Then God is in the surgeon's hands. God is in my kidney stones. And God is in that chocolate, whether I'm eating it or passing it up. But that's why we're going to enjoy cheesecake today, which I appreciate. Thank you, Barbara. And that's why for my birthday, I'm gifting myself a a trip to a new to me holistic chiropractor who comes highly recommended. And I'm excited to go tomorrow. I get to go meet her. So those are more actions that I'm doing while I'm praying for my health. So I would bet that most of us can do more to take care of our health. But what about our broken, war-torn world and our dying planet? It's kind of overwhelming. Where would we even start? Is there a way to use our spirituality to make a difference in the broader world? And here I'd like to quote a mystical, spiritual activist author named Andrew Harvey. I don't know if anybody's familiar with him. He's written a ton of books. He writes a lot about the mystics mainly in the Christian tradition, but not just. And he advocates combining the best of both worlds. He says, when the deepest and most grounded spiritual vision is married to a practical and pragmatic drive to transform all existing political, economic, and social institutions, a holy force, the power of wisdom and love in action is born. And this is the force he defines as sacred activism. How do we put this sacred activism into practice? Our hearts are breaking every time we watch the news. If God is all there is, why is there so much war and violence? Is world peace even possible? 2 weeks ago, Reverend Jacqueline Edwards was here speaking, and she shared a quote from Ernest Holmes that I think is worth repeating. And Ernest Holmes was the founder of the religious science movement and the Centers for Spiritual Living. And what he said was, no one wants war, and yet it comes out of the experience of the human race. But the day the consensus of human opinion agrees, no more war, it just won't be there. Let's all get this. War and violence are not inevitable. They're not. But doesn't it sure seem like it? After all, it's been with us probably as long as human beings have been on the planet. Jesus said, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God." That's from Matthew 5:9. And I mention this to remind us that peace is something we can all contribute to, given we're all children of God. And even the warmongers are children of God. And it's important not to lose sight of that, since dividing the world into us's and them's is what gets us into trouble. We are all children of God, no matter what religion, what nationality, what race, what credo, what belief, what non-belief, what walk of life, what class. We are all children of God. It's not a status reserved for a chosen few, despite what some teacher believe. I was raised Jewish, and I heard a lot of hatred and exclusion directed at Palestinian and Arab people. Once, after a suicide bombing incident, my grandfather said, "Those people have no respect for life. I say we bomb the hell out of them." What are you going to do with that, right? That's not what Jesus and the other spiritual teachers had in mind, I'm sure of it. It more resembles the Old Testament concept of an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth view of things, but with a significant caveat that this mentality has the idea that one of ours is worth thousands, if not millions, of one of theirs. And so with this thinking, every retaliation becomes an escalation until whole communities are decimated. And what we see right now, what's happening in the Gaza Strip, is where there's without power, without communication, without access to food and water, as if every single Palestinian person is responsible, which they're not, for what happens, unfortunately, to those Israelis that were killed. But it's the idea of that'll show them, right? Does that show them? I don't think it does. I think it does the reverse. I think what happens when those retaliation attacks happen is more young men and possibly women sign up to defend their people against what they perceive as the aggressors. And so it just continues and continues. And the violence expands geometrically, if not logarithmically. So given all this escalating horror, how can we be peacemakers? Little old us. Especially if we're not in a position, like I said, to get warring parties to the bargaining table or to call for a ceasefire or to influence it in that kind of scale. Nonetheless, I truly believe that we still can be and are peacemakers. And this is what the world needs us to be right now. The cause of peace needs us to raise our individual consciousness as high as we can so we can be part of the global consciousness raising needed for that human consensus that Ernest Holmes talked about to help make war and violence obsolete. So where do we start? Dr. Deepak Chopra invites us all to become what he calls units of peace consciousness. And to that end, he offers these points. Peace is a state of awareness. In order to advance the cause of peace, we must first be at peace. We must have peace inside ourselves. No dispute is ever settled unless both sides achieve a level of mutual satisfaction. And I think here he's referring to justice. If there isn't peace with justice, I think it's just a temporary ceasefire. It's maybe a stopping of hostilities, but until there's actual justice, till people have their basic needs met, it's a temporary holding pattern. You can actually detach yourself from judgment and blame. It may not be easy. Some issues may be easier to do, some may be harder to do. But again, if we want to achieve peace inside of ourselves so we can emit and emote peace into the world, we need to work on that. And in order to do that, it really helps to not give in to the us versus them thinking, the black and white thinking, the our side and their side, the good guys, the bad guys, however you want to look at that. These are huge. They're not easy. They speak of personal as well as social transformation. But again, we can't advance the cause of peace without being at peace ourselves, or at least working towards that goal. Otherwise, we can only get so far, because as what we believe in religious science and New Thought is that the outer world is but a reflection of the inner state of the consciousness of humanity, the group consciousness. But we are all an important part of that group consciousness, which is why we're trying to elevate ours, and which is why that's one of the visions of the Home of Truth, is to elevate consciousness to help be a part of that solution. So it then does behoove us to work on our inner selves. And how might we do that? Here's a suggestion from Ernest Holmes. He says, when we are confused and trying to go in 40 different directions at once, which is the most psychologically and physiologically disintegrating and devastating thing anyone can do, we should turn definitely from the confusion. We may need to get by ourselves. And he suggests meditating on peace until we feel a sense of peace. So we're going to spend just a moment doing just that in a short meditation. So I'm going to invite us to get comfortable, relax, close your eyes if it serves you, take some deep breaths. and reflect on these words. Come to the realization of a divine presence and the strength and stability of its inward peace. Recognize that there is but one life. That life is God. That life is within us. And there is no confusion in that life. And begin to let yourself identify with that life. And I'm going to ask us to repeat these words after me. I am one with God's peace. I am one with God's peace. There is no confusion in me. There is no confusion in me. At the center of my being, there is peace. At the center of my being, there is peace. There is nothing to be afraid of. There is nothing to be afraid of. And Ernest goes on to say, it does not matter how long it takes to do this. If we really want peace, and after a while, confusion will no longer affect us. So just breathe that in. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes and come back. Thank you. One final question as I'm wrapping up. Do you know anyone you'd say is a peacemaker at their very core? Spend a moment scanning your consciousness and see if anybody comes to mind. Somebody who so fully embodies peace that they radiate that peace everywhere that they go. Their faces are full of light. Their mere presence has a calming impact on others. See if you can bask in the glow of that energy. I have a friend named Sharon Sherrard, and she comes to mind. She's a longtime student of the Course in Miracles. She taught a group that I attended in Oakland for many years, and her face just radiates. If I showed you a picture of her, you would see it even in the photograph, light beaming off of her eyes, off of her face. And her warm smile and gentle ways let you know that your heart has found a safe harbor. At some point, she moved over to Novato, and we lost touch with each other. I think she's now in her 80s, but I'm sure she's still spreading peace and joy and radiating her presence everywhere she goes. So if you know anyone like that, think on them often, and let's ask ourselves, what is it about them that radiates peace? Is there a way we can emulate that presence? And if you're moved to, call them up and ask them directly, what's their secret? Their answer may surprise you, and it may enlighten you as well. And you may want to come back next Sunday and share that with us, because we all want to know, right? Yeah. So let's take a lesson from these folks, and let's all do what we can to radiate the peace that we wish to see. And to do this, especially when we hear or when we watch or when we see any news coverage that's likely to give us an opportunity to need to refocus our attention on peace. So I want to leave you with that, and I want to wrap this up in prayer. So join me in going within. Mother, Father, God, great mystery. We don't necessarily know all your ins and outs on how you work, but we know that you are the Alpha and the Omega, the being and the end, the beginning and the end, the everything and anything, the totality of universal life. We know that you hold all the prayers. We know that you hold the entire world without judgment, without taking sides, without claiming right or wrong or good or bad. We know that the creative life force that you are generates an isness as well as an allness to all of life. And that we are blessed when we can just let things be, when we can turn them over into your hands, knowing that there may be aspects of this world that we know not of. That as our hearts focus on the highest and the best, even as we don't always know what that is or what that looks like, and it often doesn't look like what we think it should look like or what we see on the TV sets or hear about on the radios, we know that you are still at work, holding this all crazy, happy, sad, torn, sometimes violent, sometimes war-torn world together. You're the reason we haven't self-destructed yet. That may not seem like a big thing, but in fact, it is huge. And it's something we can take to the bank. We are still here by your grace. And your grace, as we learned earlier in the service, is nothing short of amazing. That we can see love in places where you would least expect there to be love. That we can find corners of peace in places where you would never expect to find peace, and yet we do. And we even find joy in moments between anguished tears. Even at funerals, there are moments of joy when people lift up a fun time that they had with the deceased, or remember something they used to say that lightened people's hearts. Even in places where you would never expect to find joy, there it is. And that is yet another example of your grace. So for all of these gifts, for peace and joy and love and grace, and for the gift of life itself, let us be grateful. Join me in saying thank you. Thank you so much. Amen. Ashe. And so it is. Thank you.